At the very beginning, you can't explain everything that is, but I do know this. I was actually, the time I did that the first time that you just saw, I went back there and went, what have I done? What came over me? Who am I?
For decades, the public has embraced Sally Field, an actress beloved for her iconic roles. With a career spanning over 60 years, she's earned numerous accolades, including 2 Academy Awards and 3 Emmy Awards. Now at 78, the legendary actress has surprisingly opened up about the darker side of Hollywood, revealing 6 actors she hated working with throughout her long career. Known for her warmth and professionalism, Field's candid admission has sparked major curiosity. Who made the list? And what really went wrong behind the scenes? From her early days as the effervescent Gidget to her powerful portrayal of Norma Ray and the beloved mother in Forrest Gump, Sally Field has consistently embodied resilience, warmth, and an undeniable spirit. She has been perceived as the relatable star, the one who famously declared, "You like me. You really like me." Yet, behind this radiant public persona lies a story far more complex and challenging than any role she ever played. A narrative of unseen scars, battles fought not on screen, but in the quiet corners of Hollywood and deep within her own heart. In her memoir, In Pieces, published when she was 71, Sally Field offers a raw, unflinching self-portrait. This is not a typical celebrity tell-all filled with salacious gossip or boastful anecdotes. Rather, it is described as a somber, intimate, and at times wrenching self-portrait. It represents an act of profound personal investigation, a mosaic of a life lived with remarkable honesty, and a deep dive into the trauma she experienced. Field explicitly stated that she wrote the book for herself and was initially unsure if she would have the guts to publish it. The process compelled her to revisit and confront episodes she had, in her own words, purposely disremembered, highlighting the memoir as a therapeutic journey to cement together the shards of her psyche and find something that was festering within her. There was a deep contrast between how Sally Field appeared in public and what she was really going through in private. In her memoir, she shared how she often had to put on a happy face even when things were falling apart behind the scenes. She also bravely opened up about some of the most difficult moments in her life, revealing how some people caused her serious emotional pain, making her feel humiliated, controlled, or disrespected. These were turning points that shaped who she became as an actress and as a person. From a major Hollywood star who tried to overshadow her, to run-ins with pop icons, and even hurtful moments within her own family, Field's experiences reveal the emotional toll behind the spotlight. Now, let's dive in, starting with one who shook her to the core. Dustin Hoffman, the audition that broke her. Sally Field, celebrated for her acting in the early 1980s, found herself in a high-stakes audition for the film Tootsie. This was a critical juncture in her career. Having already earned an Emmy for her transformative role in Sybil, Field was actively striving to shed the girl next door and sitcom typecasting that had defined her early years in Gidget and The Flying Nun. She had dedicated herself to rigorous study under the esteemed acting coach Lee Strasberg, meticulously honing her dramatic craft to be recognized as a serious performer. The role in Tootsie, opposite the formidable Dustin Hoffman, represented a significant opportunity to solidify her dramatic credentials and further break free from her past image. Dustin Hoffman has long been a major force in Hollywood, especially during the rise of the new Hollywood era. Known for playing complex anti-heroes and emotionally raw characters, he's built a career on powerful, unforgettable roles. In 1969, right after The Graduate made him a star, Hoffman teamed up with Mia Farrow for John and Mary, a romantic drama directed by Peter Yates. The film got mixed reviews, but Hoffman's performance stood out, earning him a BAFTA Award for Best Actor and a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actor in a Musical or Comedy. At the time, both he and Farrow were riding high from breakout roles, and the two were even featured on the cover of Time magazine as rising stars of their generation. He followed that up with Little Big Man, 1970, playing Jack Crabbe, a character who ages from a teenager to 121 years old. Critics loved it. Then came Lenny, 1974, where he portrayed controversial comedian Lenny Bruce, earning another Best Actor nomination. One of his biggest roles came in Kramer vs. Kramer, 1979, alongside Meryl Streep. The powerful story about divorce and fatherhood swept the Oscars, and Hoffman won Best Actor. Given Dustin Hoffman's star power at the time, Sally Field likely saw the chance to work with him as a major opportunity. But sadly, during that crucial audition, she recalled feeling deeply uncomfortable and professionally disrespected by him. Known for his intense and unusual acting style, Hoffman kept interrupting her while she was performing. But instead of offering helpful advice, he criticized how she delivered her lines, questioned her choices, and pointed out what he thought she was doing wrong in front of everyone. It felt like he was trying to show he was in charge and make her feel small, which hurt her confidence and made her feel stripped of her worth as an actress. Field vividly described feeling reduced to the status of a schoolgirl, rather than being treated as a respected two-time Emmy-winning actress who had already proven her talent on stage and screen. She perceived the audition as an exercise in futility, feeling as though she was auditioning for a man who'd already decided you weren't enough. The emotional impact of this encounter deepened significantly when Field later learned, through a mutual contact, that Hoffman had bragged about sabotaging the audition. He reportedly claimed that the chemistry wasn't there and that he'd made sure of it. To Sally Field, what happened during that audition wasn't just unprofessional, it felt downright cruel and mean. What seemed like a lack of chemistry was really just Hoffman trying to stay in control and feed his ego, using Field's vulnerability to his advantage. After the audition, Field was filled with self-doubt. For weeks, she kept asking herself if she had messed up or done something wrong. This habit of blaming herself came from earlier painful experiences in her life, especially from her childhood. But with time and distance, she began to see the situation more clearly. She realized that the problem wasn't her performance, it was Hoffman's need to dominate the room and prove he was the smartest, even if it meant tearing someone else down. That moment became one of the most embarrassing and painful experiences in her career. In the end, the role went to Jessica Lange, who starred opposite Hoffman in Tootsie. He played Michael Dorsey, a struggling actor who disguises himself as a woman to land a soap opera role. The film was a hit and earned 10 Oscar nominations, including Hoffman's 5th for Best Actor. The Tootsie audition left a deep impact on Field. From that day on, she promised herself something important. She would never again work with men who mistook arrogance for talent, and she kept that promise. That decision became a way for her to protect herself and make better choices in the future. She chose respect and kindness over so-called genius. Burt Reynolds, The Love That Controlled. For a significant period, Sally Field and Burt Reynolds were emblematic of Hollywood glamour. Their undeniable on-screen chemistry in blockbuster films like Smokey and the Bandit, translating into a highly publicized and seemingly idyllic romance. Their relationship, which spanned from 1976 to 1980, with an intermittent on-again, off-again phase until 1982, captured public imagination and solidified their image as a golden couple. I've always thought of him rather nostalgically. He was a very important part of my life, but for a tiny little part of my life, she later wrote. I was only with him for about 3 years, and then maybe 2 years on and off after that. But it was so hugely important in my own existence, my own movement as a person. At the peak of his fame, Burt Reynolds was the very picture of American masculinity. With that rugged charm, playful grin, and easy swagger, he became the kind of man men wanted to be, and women couldn't take their eyes off. He was more than a leading man. He was a cultural icon. Stephen Dalton of The Hollywood Reporter once described Reynolds as someone who captured a sunny mischief rather than a brooding, tough guy vibe. Unlike the darker, angsty characters popular at the time, Reynolds brought a light-hearted confidence to the screen. He didn't take himself too seriously, and that made him even more appealing. His roles were usually loud, bold, and full of bravado, but always with a wink to the audience. Whether he was racing cars, charming women, or cracking jokes in the middle of chaos, Reynolds played men who were both larger than life and in on the joke. But behind all the charm and glamour, Sally Field's memoir, In Pieces, tells a much darker story. She describes her relationship with Burt Reynolds as controlling and emotionally abusive, and a painful fight to find her own voice. Field shared that while Reynolds seemed charming to the world, he was very different in private. He was manipulative and would put her down, trying to control her by training her early on, teaching her what she could and couldn't do in the relationship. Field characterized Reynolds as narcissistic, controlling, and gaslighting, asserting that he did nothing but demean Sally's career and her skill as an actor. His possessiveness extended to her past relationships, as he would pinch my face in his hands, demanding I tell him who the guy was and what kind of relationship I'd had with him, she revealed. He even imposed restrictions on her personal freedoms, such as forbidding her from cursing, a habit she cherished. Perhaps the most painful aspect of their dynamic was Reynolds' profound lack of support for Field's artistic ambitions. When she considered the role of Norma Ray, a performance that would ultimately earn her first Academy Award and cement her status as a serious dramatic actress, he dismissed it with disdain, accusing her of wanting to play a whore. This consistent undermining of her professional aspirations was a constant source of emotional distress. One moment that really showed how controlling Burt Reynolds could be happened in 1977, when Sally Field won her first Emmy Award for her powerful role in Sybil. Even though this was a huge moment in her career, Reynolds refused to go to the award show with her. Instead, she watched the ceremony alone in a rented condo, with the TV volume turned down. Field later said she kept quiet and didn't speak up for herself because of how she was raised. She had learned early on to stay small and not take up space. Reynolds not supporting her wasn't just a one-time thing. He often made her feel bad about her success. At one point, he even tried to stop her from going to the Cannes Film Festival, asking her, "You don't think you're going to win anything, do you?" Field felt profoundly trapped in an old pattern of behavior with Reynolds, describing him as a preformed rut in my road that she had been carefully trained to fall into. She recognized with painful clarity that they were a perfect match of flaws. Her decision to accept the role of Norma Ray, despite Reynolds' strong disapproval, marked a pivotal turning point in her life. She powerfully articulates this moment of self-liberation, writing, "As she, Norma Ray, unleashed her rage, I felt freed. When she found her voice, I heard mine. If I could play her, I could be me." This choice not only earned her an Academy Award, but truly cemented her place as a Hollywood icon, independent of Reynolds' influence and control. Field later expressed a complex mix of emotions regarding Reynolds, who died of a heart attack on September 6, 2018, just days before her memoir's release. She admitted she was glad he wasn't going to read it, fearing it would hurt him or cause him to lash out, even though he had publicly called her the love of his life after their breakup. But long before Hollywood, before Burt Reynolds and the Oscars, there was another man whose influence ran even deeper and darker. The man who shaped Sally Field's childhood in ways that would echo for the rest of her life. Jock Mahoney, the childhood shadow. In her memoir, In Pieces, Sally Field bravely opens up about the painful truth of being intimately and emotionally abused by her stepfather, actor and stuntman Jock Mahoney. This shocking revelation helps explain the deep emotional layers behind many of Field's personal struggles and choices throughout her life and career. Mahoney, who married Field's mother in 1952 after her divorce, was a well-known Hollywood figure at the time. He starred in westerns and even played Tarzan in 2 Tarzan films. But behind his strong, heroic image on screen was a very different man in private, one who caused Sally years of hidden pain and trauma. Field detailed the abuse with raw honesty, recounting that it began when she was a small child around 7 years old. It started innocently enough with requests for her to walk on his back to massage his sore muscles, but then escalated to more explicit and invasive acts. She described the agonizing internal conflict she experienced during these incidents. "I knew. I felt both a child, helpless, and not a child. Powerful. This was power, and I owned it. But I wanted to be a child, and yet..." Field shared that the abuse happened often and got worse over time until she found the strength to put a stop to it at age 14. Remarkably, Field carried this secret for decades, never speaking of it to anyone, not even her mother, until much later in her life, in her 60s, during the arduous process of writing her memoir. "I couldn't expect protection to come from my mother," she wrote, explaining that her mother was often drinking and emotionally unavailable. Field explains that these harrowing experiences forced her to develop profound psychological defense mechanisms. She learned to divide herself into pieces to survive, to wall off the pain and push forward. She internalized a devastating and pervasive lesson that to feel loved, you have to be invisible and terrified. This unprocessed trauma cast a long shadow over her adult life, manifesting in patterns such as compulsive overeating, violent temper tantrums, and a deeply ingrained predisposition to not be seen or speak up in various situations, including her relationships. Mahoney's control over Sally Field went beyond their home. It also affected her early career. When Field was hesitant about taking the lead in The Flying Nun, a show she didn't like and felt stifled her creativity, one of the show's executive producers reached out to Mahoney for help, convincing her. Mahoney then showed up at her apartment without warning. Using fear and intimidation, he gave her a chilling warning. "If you don't do this show, Sally, you may never work again." Field was only 19 at the time, new to the industry, and still vulnerable. Feeling cornered, she gave in and accepted the role, staying with the show for 3 years, even though it made her feel trapped and unhappy. Field reportedly hated The Flying Nun due to a lack of respect from the show's directors and the subsequent typecasting it imposed upon her career, making it difficult for her to secure more serious roles. Her initial acceptance of the role, despite her profound dislike, was a direct consequence of this power dynamic and her learned helplessness from childhood. Writing in pieces was an intensely personal, vulnerable accounting and a hugely emotional process for Field, requiring her to relive the complex and painful details of her childhood with Mahoney. She grappled with the paradox that he could be lovable at the same time that he was threatening, a complexity that made her healing journey even more challenging. But just as the cameras kept rolling, so did her private battles. And when the one person she thought would understand turned on her, the silence got louder. Steve Bloomfield, the heartbreak behind the binge. While working on The Flying Nun, Sally broke up with her boyfriend at the time, Steve Bloomfield, after he criticized her acting. That hit her hard. What followed was a spiral into loneliness, emotional eating, and deep self-doubt. Saturdays, which should have been her day off, became a cycle of work and isolation. She'd head to a recording studio or a photo shoot, then spend the rest of the day in her kitchen, trying to fill the emptiness. "I'd cook and eat everything," she wrote, "spaghetti with loads of meat sauce, a whole chocolate cake until I was in actual pain, and I was always alone, hiding in a closet of food." Field tried to make herself throw up for relief. "I'd stick my fingers down my throat, hoping to puke it all out, but nothing came, just a dry, useless gag." Back then, she had no idea what an eating disorder was. "No one talked about that kind of thing in the late 60s, she said. Desperate, she went to a doctor, and his answer was diet pills. He gave me one for every morning, along with a super strong diuretic. I'd take them, wait 30 minutes, and just like that, I'd be bouncing off the walls, my mouth dry, talking too fast, and needing to pee every 2 minutes," she recalled. But the pills didn't fix the pain, they just masked it. Beneath the energy boost and forced smiles, Sally was still battling shame, loneliness, and a growing feeling that no one really saw her. And then came an encounter that only deepened that wound. Davy Jones, The Flying Nun's Humiliation. While The Flying Nun projected an image of wholesome innocence and squeaky clean charm to millions of viewers, Sally Field herself harbored a deep disdain for the show, openly admitting she hated it and felt profoundly embarrassed by the whole concept. This internal conflict was exacerbated by the show's setting. Its set was located on the very same Hollywood lot as The Monkees, wildly popular musical sitcom. The Monkees themselves were a cultural phenomenon, a pop-rock band formed for their TV show, achieving immense success and becoming teen idols in the late 1960s. This juxtaposition of Field's discomfort with her role and the vibrant, carefree atmosphere of The Monkees set created an environment ripe for personal distress. Field recounted how the four members of The Monkees, Davy Jones, Mike Nesmith, Peter Tork, and Mickey Dolenz, would frequently visit her set. Their visits, however, were far from friendly or collegial. They would watch her, but never talk to her directly. Instead, they would nudge each other, whisper and laugh, making her feel acutely made fun of. At 21 years old, and already described as painfully shy, Field was unable to confront them, choosing instead to internalize the discomfort and humiliation. The situation escalated dramatically one day when Davy Jones and two other members of The Monkees suddenly crowded into her tiny two-wheel trailer dressing room. Even in this confined space, they maintained their pattern of disrespect, not addressing her directly, but instead standing in front of her, staring and making jokes among themselves. The uncomfortable moment peaked when Davy Jones stepped forward and made a crude, highly inappropriate remark referencing an intimate act and her capacity for it. Field, at 21, was genuinely naive and didn't even understand the nature of what had been said at the time. However, the uproarious laughter that erupted from the three men made it undeniably clear that she was being humiliated. In her embarrassment and confusion, a desperate attempt to defuse the situation, she blurted out, "Yes, sir! You bet! You bet!" She was rescued from this excruciating moment when someone from the production called The Monkees back to their set. Back then, Sally Field blamed herself for how awkward and uncomfortable she felt during that upsetting moment. She thought it was her own fault and felt ashamed. That kind of self-blame was common at the time, especially for young women, because society often made it hard to speak up or even recognize when someone else was in the wrong. It wasn't until years later, after a lot of reflection, that she understood the truth. As she wrote, "It never occurred to me then that it might be their behavior that made me want to retch, not my own." This moment revealed just how common and harmful casual harassment were in 1960s Hollywood. When Field shared this story in her memoir, many people were shocked and disappointed, especially because the behavior came from members of The Monkees, a band known for their fun and innocent image. Sadly, young actresses like Field had little protection back then. Their discomfort was often brushed off or blamed on them, which made it harder for them to stand up for themselves. This experience became part of Field's long journey to find her voice and push back against the way the industry tried to reduce her to just a pretty face. The incident in Sally Field's trailer, orchestrated by Davy Jones, was not an isolated act, but part of a pattern of collective disregard from The Monkees. The boys will be boys mentality, which some public commentators later suggested was acceptable for the era, minimized the impact of such behavior on young women like Field. This experience, along with others detailed in her memoir, contributed to Field's growing resolve to assert her boundaries and pursue roles that allowed her to be taken seriously as an artist, ultimately breaking free from the typecasting and disrespect she endured in her early career. Bob Rafelson, the audition she couldn't forget. Sally Field's audition for the 1976 film Stay Hungry, under director Bob Rafelson, was nothing like a typical screen test. It was uncomfortable and crossed a line she never expected. Rafelson was one of the key architects of the new Hollywood movement that transformed American cinema in the late 60s and 70s. As a filmmaker, he co-founded Raybert Productions, which later became BBS Productions, with his business partner, Bert Schneider. Together, they helped shape some of the most iconic and culture-shifting films of that era. As a director, Rafelson made a name for himself with 5 Easy Pieces, 1970, a quiet but powerful drama starring Jack Nicholson that captured the restless spirit of a generation. He followed it with The King of Marvin Gardens, 1972, another moody character study that showed his talent for digging deep into human emotion. As a producer with BBS, he backed Easy Rider, 1969, the road movie that became a symbol of counterculture rebellion, and The Last Picture Show, 1971, a black-and-white coming-of-age film that became a critical darling. All 3 films, Easy Rider, 5 Easy Pieces, and The Last Picture Show, were eventually selected for the Library of Congress's National Film Registry for being culturally and historically significant. Interestingly, Rafelson also played a major role in the world of pop music and television. He was one of the creators of The Monkees, the wildly popular TV show and band created in the 60s to mirror the charm and chaos of the Beatles. They quickly rose to fame as teen heartthrobs. But behind the laughter and catchy tunes was a different story for Sally Field. It's a bitter twist of irony that Bob Rafelson, the man credited with launching The Monkees into stardom, was also deeply tied to one of the most humiliating moments in Sally's young career. In her memoir, Sally Field recalls that during her audition for Stay Hungry, director Bob Rafelson casually asked her to remove her shirt while they discussed the role. He claimed it was necessary to envision how a scene in the film might be shot. Caught off guard and eager for the part, Field says she complied, doing her best to remain composed despite feeling deeply uncomfortable. Then came another inappropriate request. Field recalls that director Bob Rafelson told her she could have the role, but only after proving how well she could kiss. Under pressure, she complied and secured the part. When the New York Times reached out for comment, Rafelson denied the entire story, saying, "It's totally untrue. That's the first I've ever heard of this. I didn't make anybody kiss me in order to get any part." Stay Hungry is a quirky 1976 drama that follows a young man from a wealthy family in Birmingham, Alabama, played by Jeff Bridges, who gets caught up in a shady real estate deal. To pull it off, he needs to buy out a local gym as part of a larger land grab. But things don't go as planned. He ends up falling for the gym's receptionist, played by Sally Field, and getting drawn into the free-spirited world of Joe Santo, a charming Austrian bodybuilder played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's training for the Mr. Universe competition. Critics had mixed feelings about the film. Vincent Canby of the New York Times admitted it wasn't all bad, but said it tried too hard to be quirky and meaningful. Still, he praised the cast's performances and how the film captured the feel of the New South. Over at the Los Angeles Times, Charles Champlin felt the movie tried to be too many things at once, calling it several movies not quite rolled into one. He thought the ending was cheerful, but the story lacked emotional weight to make it truly satisfying. The film holds a 69% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and a 60% on Metacritic, both pointing to a generally mixed reception. Still, for Sally Field, the audition for the film became yet another moment in her early career where power was misused and her boundaries were ignored. Ironically, Stay Hungry would also mark the end of the working relationship between Rafelson and his wife, production designer Toby Carr Rafelson. She reportedly discovered her husband was pursuing other women during the shoot, including Field. After that, she filed for divorce and never worked with him again. Sally Field's memoir, In Pieces, offers a profoundly honest and courageous exploration of a life lived under the intense scrutiny of the public eye, yet fraught with deeply personal challenges and emotional wounds. Her decision to share these experiences, particularly those involving 6 prominent actors, transcends mere celebrity gossip. The memoir serves as her courageous attempt to cement together the shards of her psyche and find something that was festering within her. It was a brave act to finally drown out that tune with your own voice, confronting the past to reclaim her present and unravel the deeply ingrained patterns that had shaped her life. What do you think? Were you shocked by any of the names? Do you think she was right to speak up after all this time? And if you were in her shoes, would you have done the same? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.